County police officers with me. 2 retired, but nonetheless had this experience of being pulled out of cars by white officers, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me go down the line here. We've got Eddie.
Yes, sir.
Who is retired from St. Louis City Police Department. How many years?
28 and a half.
28 years. Patricia Thomas.
Yes.
Welcome. You're retired too from St. Louis City Police.
I am retired.
Right? And we've got Eddie Simmons, who is currently Dennis, who is currently an officer with the Berkeley Police Department. All right, so let's start with your experience, my friend. What happened to you?
Sir, I was on my way home and came down Goodfellow, passed up about 5 Pine Lawn police officers in the city, and I passed them, and I noticed one car got behind me, and the car just followed behind me, so I continued on to my house. When I got home, turned to my driveway, he turned his lights on. I thought it was an ex-city officer that I used to ride with playing around, but it wasn't. And I drove to my driveway, and he stopped his car, turned on the spotlight, and I looked back. He had his gun drawn just straight at me like this, saying, "Get out of the car, get on the ground." So I held my badge up and said, "Man, I'm a retired police officer. What are you doing?" He says, "Get on the ground." Now,
is this a white guy?
It's a white guy.
Okay.
Now listen, this is honest to God truth. It sounds horrible, but I was thinking this man's getting ready to kill me, so I'm going to have to get him. So, and the only reason why I'm here today is because at that moment my daughter came out and my neighbor came out, and at that time I ceased what I was getting ready to do because I wasn't going to let the man just kill me and then give an explanation about why Eddie's dead.
Right, so Eddie, what happened? So what was he doing?
He said that, hey, so after he got me, I let him handcuff me, put me in the car, I'm towing your car, I'm locking you up. I said, well, do that. I said, well, what you need to do, you need to call your chief, tell your chief you're at Eddie's house. That's all you got to say. He did that, and then he came to me and held the phone up to my ear because I was still in cuffs, and I talked to his chief. He said, hey, you okay, Eddie? I said, what's wrong with this clown? What's wrong with him? I told the guy who I was. Why is he even doing this? The guy tells me that, well, somebody in a Corvette just like this one shot at us. I says, man, you're lying. How come your radio's there's no chat on the radio?
So why do you think he was doing this?
Because he can. Because he wants to.
All right, Patricia, what was your experience?
Oh, my experience was many years ago. I had got off work and went home and went to sleep. And my son, without my permission, took my car, went into Jennings, and had an accident. His girlfriend called me, and she said, he's had an accident in your car, you need to get up there. Well, I got up there, and the officers told me to walk away from the accident, accept the damage that was to my car, and that everything would be, just handle it. And I said, no, I said, my car has a large amount of damage to it, which I'm sure, and that later I found out it was $4,000 worth of damage. And I told my son, I said, what's going on? He said, well, that lady is the officer's girlfriend, and they want you to, she doesn't have insurance. I said, well, that's not my problem. So I walked over to the officer, and I said, officer, I want a police report of this accident. And he said, you're a city officer. I said, of course I am. And I showed him my ID. And at that point, he called me a nigger and told me that one thing about the city officers was that they were stupid, on top of you being a nigger, is what his exact words was. So I have been in situations in the past and have seen people in situations and always knew that if you get yourself in a bad situation, the best thing to do is just be quiet and try to work yourself way out of it. And I did.
That's what you did.
And they arrested me, took me to the station, and later I was released and the charges were dropped.
And it didn't matter whether you were a police officer or anything?
No.
Dennis, what happened to you?
It happened in Arkansas, right at the Arkansas-Missouri border. I was stopped by a trooper, a young white guy, and he pulled me out of the car. He had me get out, and he just began to shout and scream and curse at me profusely. And, made threats and told me if I was going a little bit faster, he would lock me up, and he made threats. When I showed him my ID and my badge, he got quiet, and then he decided to let me go. He says, you're lucky, and let me go.
Wow. So now, how did this change in terms of your attitudes when you moved on, when you actually, went back to work as a police officer? How did it change your attitude after those experiences?
Oh, well, it didn't change my attitude. I already knew it was like that. You see, people think we are a brotherhood, and I've always said, like I told Mark before, we are all blue. You got your light blue and you got your dark blue, and that's just how it is. the treatment that we receive from other officers is the same treatment we receive while we're working with the sergeants, lieutenants, promotions, getting fired. It's just bad treatment that we receive all the time.
Patricia, did it change any way you operated on the street after that?
What it changed the way I operated was I tried to use more discretion. I tried to use more compassion, and I tried to look at the big picture of the situations versus just going in looking at it one way. I tried not to let it change me as a person, because the one thing that I was a police officer, and I'm a mother of 6, and I had given my life to the police department, and so I didn't want that to change, because that was all that I knew. But my heart was a little heavy, and it changed some things in my life.
Dennis, what about you? Because, I mean, you actually didn't seem too surprised by what happened to you. Or
No.
were you surprised?
No, I wasn't surprised at all, and I'm still not surprised to hear some of the things that are going on between police and the white community as far as policing goes. It's still occurring now. What I do is I teach police brutality workshops across the country now to teach young people to control their attitudes and emotions and deal with rational thinking.
You mean people on the street or police officers?
I teach young youth, young
Okay.
African-American males as well.
Are you concerned that police officers aren't similarly trained? I mean, obviously, you're teaching young people how to deal with law enforcement, but does law enforcement, are they adequately prepared how to deal with young people?
I think you dealing with culture diversity is one thing that's needed in our community that's lacking. We have more white officers in black communities than we do black officers, and that's one of the problems. It's one of the major problems, and it has to change. It has to change, and with the situations that are going on now, departments are saying it's hard for them or difficult for them to find young African American males. I say that's not true, and I think we all agree. You're looking at the culture in which they set up the testing of promotional systems, as well as the hiring or the entry part to get in the police department, makes it very difficult for those young African American males.
So, because the conventional wisdom has always been, they just can't find qualified black police officers, like in Ferguson, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. Actually, you mentioned Pine Lawn, because Ferguson, I think, even by the numbers, gets a raw deal by the Department of Justice. But if you look at some of those other communities, because your example is in Pine Lawn, even though it was a white officer involved, Pine Lawn and the amount of money that they're taking, fines, tickets for their budget, everything else. If a black law enforcement officer, do they really want to work in Pine Lawn when actually maybe they can work with the county and make more money? Or
Well, I don't know how their hiring practices are, but when you speak about the fact that they say they can't find black recruits for the job, I went into a recruit class to talk to one of the instructors, and when I went in, I was working as a police officer. I left out, and I turned around and went back in because the whole room was white. So I immediately, at that time, I was the president of the Ethical Society of Police. I went to see the chief, which was Chief Mokwa, and I told him about the whole room was white. Do you know the next class was all black except for 2? So that's just a lie. That's all it is. You find what you want to find. Now, all of a sudden, you had a room full of black people. But you just say on one hand, we can't find anybody because you don't want to find anybody. It's really hard getting through it.
let me just ask you one quick question, though, because there might be some folks out there, I'm one of them, who would wonder, okay, so is this a white officer thing versus black, or is this a police officer versus citizen thing? Was it racial in your mind? I mean, obviously yours was, because he used the N-word on you. But do you think it's strictly a racial thing, or is it a police officer, law enforcement, citizen thing?
Me, I think is a frame of mind where I can do this, and there's no repercussions about it. If you are a police officer and you see that these black people are being treated different, well, then you know you can do this too. You can do it, and that's what's happening. It does.
What do you think?
Well, what I see is it's a history of racism that has occurred throughout history from the inception of policing all the way up until now. You're dealing with an instance where you have 5th and 6th generation officers who are continuously being cycled throughout the police departments across America. And when you deal with that, you're dealing with the racism that continues, because some of the young officers feel that they can do what their grandfather, great-grandfather did. So it continues and continues, and it goes even further than that. Not only is it the young police officers, but they integrate with lawyers and doctors and judges, and this thing continues. That's why you have racism within the judicial system, and it just continues. So it's a historical thing.
Dennis, Patricia, Eddie, thank you very much
Yes,
for being
sir.
with us.
Thank you.
And Kaysen, if this were a poker game, I'd fold. Good job, buddy. Coming up, Scotty Sherman to talk about banning the box, the effort to get felons more leeway when it comes to getting jobs.